I'm Mary Forgione. I write the Wild newsletter for the Los Angeles Times, and I cover the outdoors. And it's fabulous to be outside.
We're at Bette Davis Picnic Area by the Los Angeles River on a windy, warm, beautiful afternoon, really. There have been non-stop birds and animals since I pulled up my little Volkswagen and parked. So there have been fox squirrels and mourning doves and great egrets, and a flock of finches went through, maybe just house finches, I didn't get a good look at them, a black phoebe, and then a few helicopters and sirens and police and so on. But really, the middle of the day, there is still life thriving all around us, separate from these great sycamore trees that are a couple hundred years old. We are right on the floodplain of the Los Angeles River right now.
I love that. I mean, that's kind of what I write about for the LA Times, but if I could give Angelenos one thing, it would be look around and find your wild selves. And it is all here. I mean, and we're in a park where there's coyotes and, all kinds of deer and all kinds of creatures that most of us probably don't notice unless we go on those trails and seek it out.
I think it's sort of a shame that we need to encourage people to celebrate their birthright, but it really is. Wherever you live, whoever you are, this is the oxygen is yours, the sun is yours, these trees are yours. It's absolutely all around us every minute of every day. And you had asked me earlier, if I'm a birder, how often do I go birding? I'm always birding, even on the freeway, because there's always something to see. Coming from the Antelope Valley down here to meet you guys here in this park, there was a red-tailed hawk. There's always something passing through our kind of zone of awareness, assuming we turn that zone of awareness on and we're actually not looking at our screen the entire time. Oh, there's no birds inside my little phone. Drop the phone, there the birds are. How about that?
Exactly right. I think we used to think about nature as being far out, far away. Oh, I have to go to Yosemite or whatever. But you're absolutely right. You just need to tune into it wherever you are. I want to ask you about the ugly spots, the Antelope Valley, and how you found it to be so beautiful.
Well, I have to confess, like everybody, the COVID shutdown altered my life, how I taught, where I could travel, how I interacted with my family. So the dog and I, the happy dog and I, Lucy the dog, became locavores of our own topography. Wherever we could reach in the morning walk before my afternoon classes start, that's what became our world. And I began to realize that when I'm normally home in the regular time, I would say I'm going to drive to Trader Joe's or I'm going to drive to work. And that would be from point A to point C. And I would kind of think there's a blank spot in between. But when you walk that route, there are no blank spots on the map. There's merely a blank spot in my awareness or my knowledge. And I began to realize what a fabulous mosaic of habitats there were just around my cruddy little Palmdale house. It's just astounding that there are these little pieces of undeveloped land, and in them there are rabbits and coyotes and gnat catchers and all these things that I really had taken for granted or overlooked or just assumed there couldn't possibly be anything here. This is a dirt lot after all. And that's actually a very false assumption.
Which is fantastic. I want to ask you about writing the book that you just wrote. It's a very personal account. I mean, back in the day, right, nature books were all about the science of it. But you tell us about your life and where you chose to live says about you and how you perceive it in the landscape, which I kind of love because it gives me context. And it gives me, somebody who lives in the South Bay, context for somebody who lives on the other side of LA County, 100 miles away.
I'll hold the book up. So this is a salad only the devil would eat.
I love the title.
The Joys of Ugly Nature. And one of the things I'm very self-consciously trying to do is say, can we move away from that high church attitude? You were talking about this earlier, that Ansel Adams' pristine 1940s Yosemite is somehow nature, and then what I'm doing in my day-to-day life somehow isn't. And that includes the fact that I work, I've got a dog, I'm divorced, I've got all these real life conditions. I've got to deal with my kids, or they have to deal with me. Someone's dealing with somebody there in the kid-dad relationship. And I don't see why nature and real life and my literary life and my visual life can't intersect in the sense that, oh, it's a pure nature experience. We must put on our clean underwear to go do our nature. Like, oh, just, forget that kind of nonsense. And Ansel Adams, as great a printer as he was, as great as a composition, he could just compose like crazy. Remember that he did some of his best work in World War II with exemptions. So everyone else had to have permits in order to drive. They had to have their little voucher coupons to get rubber tires, to get petrol. And he was exempted from all of those sort of restrictions, all that kind of rationing, and able to travel freely. There's less air traffic because, of course, it's the war. So the skies above Yosemite are pristine. He's giving us a version of nature that only existed for a very narrow range of time and for a very privileged set of individuals, himself included. And I want nature for the rest of us. So I call it ugly nature, that's a nice, summary note. But really, of course, I don't think it's all that ugly. I actually think it's pretty nice.
I think that's exactly the moment we're in right now, where everybody's discovering. So you go from those like gorgeous, majestic landscapes to Instagram, where everybody's posting themselves jumping or standing at the Grand Canyon or whatever. And even though it makes it much more shareable, much more accessible. I'm not a big Instagram fan, but I do go on there and see where people in real time, what they're doing in nature, where they're hiking, where they're going.
Take more selfies. But
Yeah,
by all means,
exactly.
be as vain as you want to be. Take those selfies. No one's going to care in 5 years, but you think you're something, that's fine. If that's the excuse you need to go out into nature, look, I got a selfie in nature. By all means, take 3, take 5.
I agree. And this moment we're in, post-COVID or in COVID, however we define it, people have absolutely turned to their local parks and their local mountains, which I think is great, and started to discover all that they could do, in their backyard and beyond.
For me, language is waiting inside of me whether I want it or not. And it's sort of that idea of hunger or a gnawingness. And I can try to ignore it or pretend that I don't have any time for language right now. I'm much too busy. I don't have any aptitude. I don't know enough to do language. And language is going to be there saying, oh, I'm coming out. You can do whatever you want. I'm coming out. You better write me down because I'm not coming back. When I come out right now, you better be ready to write me down. So that's when I have to say, excuse me, class, 5-minute break. Whip out the journal out of the backpack, and I'm just going to go into language and hope that I come back after the 5-minute mark. So I do that enough times, and ultimately an essay starts to coalesce, and ultimately those essays become a book. And this is a kind of an interesting book to my mind. It is a little bit unusual. It is not pure nature or holy nature. It is about journaling. It is about being divorced. It is about all the kind of messy realities of our everyday existence. And thank you, Namaste to Heyday, for putting it together.
Does it start with points in nature? You notice something and something clicks? Does it start with points in the family, something you're going? I'm just so curious about that.
I accumulate images, whether I want to or not. So driving, whether it's the color of some leaves or the texture of some shrub on the hillside or the sound of, earlier we had some acorn woodpeckers messing around in the background here. And those images stay with me ideally for an hour or two until I get a moment where I can start to write things down. And so language is coming out of specific moments in natural experience, a smell, a taste, a sound. But language is also just coming from what I'm reading. And so it is true that if you want to write better, you got to read more. If you want to, the more you read, the more you want to write. You want to be part of that conversation. As sad as it is, I always read something and think, man, I wish I were a better writer. I could write like that person. Shoot, dang, I'm stuck in my own little brain with the tiny little bit of words I have right now. That's too bad. But I'll have to make do and try to see what I can come out of that.
I love this. It brings so much more context for me, particularly because I love LA and I love LA's wild parts. And I love reading about the landscape and reading about your experiences in that landscape. So I'm just curious, what do people most often ask you about? People ask me, what's the best hike to take my +1? What's the best hike for an apocalyptic backdrop? Okay, Vasquez Rocks. What do people ask you?
I have to say, when I'm and I give poetry readings as well as natural history events, and so when I'm being introduced, sometimes they say, oh, he's seen 5,000 species of birds, one of my little, merit badges on my sleeve. And then inevitably someone wants to say, I saw a bird in the backyard.
Oh.
And then they give me the world's worst description.
Yes.
And as long as I treat that seriously and give them an answer, even if I'm wrong, who cares? Like, oh, so that's called a towhee. Oh, I'm going to write that. Oh, I saw a towhee in my yard. Hey, Madge, we have towhees in the backyard. This guy told us all about the towhees. Like, sure, fine, whatever. I'm glad you're noticing. That's fine. Buy the bird book, California's Guide to the Birds Among Us, and you'll know more about the towhees. But that's kind of the thing when people come up afterwards. One of the things we've been talking about is the way that language can give people the power and the courage and the insight to go out and explore the very nature that is their heritage. If you read about it in the book, somehow that validates it and it makes it seem like, okay, oh, this is a hike the LA Times said I should do. I can go do this hike now, instead of sort of like, how do I start or where do I go? And the same thing with really a lot of the beginning bird watching books. Doesn't have to be mine. Most books are pretty accessible to somebody who just wants to, oh, I saw that flower or I saw that bird, and suddenly they feel some connection between the two. Have you felt that too?
That is absolutely, in terms of it being a bridge. I mean, for me, growing up, reading from books was the way I started to understand nature more. And then, of course, going out and whatnot. But yeah, I think that people are into looking at a hike or looking at a bird and saying, oh, I want to go do this. I want to go find this. And to me, that's the beauty of having that kind of rapport with a reader or whatnot with what I do. I sometimes worry that people aren't going to read anything longer than an Instagram post and get their inspiration there, but that's okay too, because
no, I was
all good.
Skeptical, and I don't have social media account, which we can get into, someone can chastise me later, but I was a little skeptical. But really, lots of people love books, still read,
yes.
And independent bookstores are absolutely surviving, thriving, spreading out the good work that they're doing, and they are finding audiences that want great material. And whether it's from Heyday or from the Los Angeles Times or from the San Francisco Chronicle or whomever, that great material is there and it is valued. Not everybody. There are those people that only want the audiobook, but there's plenty of people who appreciate a well-written, well-designed, well-produced book. And it's such a delight to get one as a gift, in my case, or to help make one once in a while.
I agree. And I think one thing I learned during COVID was just how much information people were looking for. Very basic. How do I go on a hike? How do I go camping? How do I do this? How do I do that? I invite everybody to explore their local backyard, whether it's LA, Berkeley, Oakland, wherever you are, and come and read The Wild at the LA Times. It's free. You sign up. It arrives in your inbox every Thursday. latimes.com/The Wild.
And I just want to praise Heyday again for making really interesting books, or letting me make an interesting book this one time. If you want to be able to find out more about this, it's coming out very early November. And I also will be doing an event in Santa Cruz if you'd like to get a copy signed. We'll put information on the Heyday website. And Jonathan Franzen, the birdwatcher first, novelist second, or is he a novelist first and birdwatcher second? He'll be introducing, so you could also meet somebody who writes even better than I do. I am not on social media, but I will answer any emails that come in to the Heyday office. Thank you and good night.